Even though the game will probably be up to about version 9.5 by the time this hits YouTube, here's a video from 9.0 test, first iteration. I decided to take the M4 Sherman out for a spin to check out the new model. Ended up in a tier 7 game on Swamp.
Let's go!
It does look quite nice. The Sherman suspension is quite pleasant to watch. The Tiger and T54, it's not quite as noticeable. See here I was driving deliberately into craters and ditches and things just to watch it. The game is running a little stuttery. That's not a frame rate issue, that's just because it's loading the replay. Usually when I record these replays, I run the replay through once and then run it again and record on the second time. It seems to help it run smoother because it's already cached all the information or whatever the fuck the game does. I don't know, I'm not good at computer. So you can see the sniper scope shadow is now gone. Instead they've replaced it with this fucking bluish green overlay for nearly every tank. So far I played 2 that don't have it. The Leopard 1 and the STB 1, and it seems it may have been an accidental oversight by Wargaming because it just doesn't seem like it was deliberately skipped on them. It's more likely Wargaming simply forgot to do it, or there was some sort of issue getting it to work. So you can see here I'm just sort of dicking around, taking shots where I can get them. Obviously this is the test server, not only is it the test server, but I'm bottom tier in a Sherman, so I'm mostly just taking shots where I can get them and sort of hoping for the best.
Gotcha.
I do, however, get a nice shot on that SU-152 as he tries to drop behind the hill. Bit of luck there. You can probably tell some of the sounds have been changed as well. Tank explosions sound like somebody throwing a wet phone book on the floor now. I hope they change them. The new engine sounds and so on haven't been added to test yet. I did read a while ago they were planned to be included in 9.0 test, maybe the second iteration or a third iteration, but they certainly aren't ready yet. Take a big hit there and decide to vacate the area. I'm of course playing without any of my mods, so the game feels a lot clunky to me. I don't have my nose scroll, I don't have my stabilized sight, and I don't have XVM telling me how much damage I'm doing or where people are spotting.
They're knocked out.
He also tracks himself and I'm able to get a shot on him. So let's take a quick look at the Sherman. Just while I'm driving to my next position. You can see there's not a huge amount of movement in the suspension. It's actually less noticeable in the Tiger and T54 simply because the wheels on the suspension are so big. I mean, the movement's there, it's just not really apparent. I suspect it's because Wargaming are rather leery of ending up with the problems War Thunder has, where tanks behave like they're... I don't know, they don't behave like tanks, they rock too much. The suspensions seem to have a lot more travel than they should for some tanks. I suppose the real test will be when we see how the suspensions work on things like the Panther and the T-34 and so on, and the EZ-8, the HVSS suspension. Either way, even just the little bit of range of motion that's currently in there is a significant improvement over just flat tracks. The model itself looks a lot nicer. The new lighting seems okay on the tanks that have been remodeled, and on some of the tanks that haven't but have had the they've had their textures redone to get the new shaders to work with them. some of the maps look good, some of the maps look like shit, some of the tanks look like shit. In fact, some of the tanks are completely bugged. The Panzer III Stug 3 Aus B, I think the Stug 3 Aus G, Panzer IV Aus H. There's a bunch of tanks that, particularly the German ones that have been split up, the camouflage doesn't work properly. In fact, on the Panzer III, it just, like, the camouflage covers the entire tank and it's completely opaque, so the tank has no texture. It's kind of weird. And as you can see, the Tiger, for instance, with its new HD model, the Tiger is very darkly coloured, which makes it look strange when it has camouflage on. It's almost black, unless it dies into full sunlight, and even then it's still a bit dark. So you can see here the destroyed Sherman model. And the E25, which I believe has had its shaders reworked. At the same time they did all this, I think that a lot of the tanks had their track textures changed. Certainly a lot of the tanks that otherwise have not been touched seem to have much better looking tracks. I think the foliage looks actually slightly worse now. Almost harks back to the olden days of the original graphics engine. Like, the lighting on the trees is very flat and very, they're just not good looking. I don't know, I'm sure it'll take a little tweaking. 9.0 so far, as I said in the first iteration, is very, very plainly a work in progress. It's so unfinished. I'm actually surprised they put the test server up when they did. It looks like it could have used another couple of weeks at least. I think the FV304 also had shaders redone. You can see the camouflage patterns in general are much more like stronger. The overlays are less transparent, which I think is a problem. It doesn't look so good. The camera patterns looked good before when they were kind of semi-transparent, and you know, they look kind of worn and scuffed and blended, and now because the colors used in a lot of the camera patterns are so bold, they just look out of place. This one's not so bad, but some of the more colorful camera patterns just look completely wrong. Yet to see if Wargaming fix it, or indeed if they consider it to be a problem. I would say it is. And hopefully they'll do something about it. A note on frame rate, I'm running 9.0 test on full settings as opposed to regularly. I run the game slightly below full settings, and my frame rate has actually gone up on most maps. Obviously the recording's going to drop it a bit, but during actual gameplay I'm getting around 45-50 frames a second. The lowest I've seen it drop to is about 35-ish, which is almost exactly the same kind of figures I get now. So despite the drastic increase of detail on 3 of the tanks, and I'm not talking about, say, a match with one T-54 or one Sherman, Tier 9 and 10 matches on test right now. Well, Tier 10 matches are all Tier 10 TDs, but Tier 9 matches are essentially 2 teams of T-54s and maybe a handful of other Tier 9s scattered throughout. So that's an awful lot of polys being rendered on the screen at once, and yet the game seems to run better, or, you know, as well as it did before, if not better. Well, considering the amount on screen, I would say better. While I do all this talking about the new graphics, you can see our little FV304 doing his best to carry his heart out. Certainly one of the better players I saw on the test server. He did really well this match. I'm going to spoil it, we don't win, but it was pretty close, and it was a really solid effort by this guy. It goes to show the FV304 has a lot of carry potential. Obviously it's not a game I'm showcasing because of any spectacular skill on my part. I just drove around and shot at, heated a couple of things and then died. I'm more putting this up, first of all, to show off. Well, by the time this gets out, the Sherman model will have already been in game along with several other redone models, but show off what 9.0 looked like in its initial stages of testing, I suppose. There is a chance I might just jump the upload queue and throw this in within the next week of today, just to get it out there before the patch hits the live server, but I'm not sure about that. It really depends what else I get material-wise from the test server and the other games I have from the live server I've yet to upload quite far behind, so I'm not sure. If nothing else, the videos that several weeks or months behind serve as almost a time capsule for the olden days of World of Tanks, so who knows. One thing it will demonstrate though is that even early on, well, aside from that FE304's solid effort, it'll, early on, even with a very distinctly unfinished test, Wargaming are doing something right. Not only are they improving the fidelity of the tank models, they've also figured out how to do it without nuking people's computers, keeping in mind that multi-core has not been enabled yet, and I don't have exactly the most NASA computer out there. So if they can keep this up, I could see full matches of, 15 versus 15 of these new high-detailed models on perhaps even better modeled maps, not having a significant performance impact for anyone with even sort of a lower to mid-tier rig. Of course, if you can't run this, there's still always a standard graphics settings, which you should be able to run without too much problem. So they're taking a step in the right direction. I think one of the big criticisms people were leveling at World of Tanks, I think they were undeserved, is the quality of its models. Now, the World of Tanks models looked good before. They looked atmospherically good and technically good. They might not have looked graphically impressive, but they looked like tanks. They had oil leaking out of fuel tanks and scratches and dents and casting marks and all that sort of thing. Obviously the new models have that too. It's just, for now, they're a bit clean. I suppose Wargaming haven't done the final weathering passes on the textures yet, but I always thought World of Tanks didn't really need the flashiest graphics to be a good game. It's just a good, solid game with some deep mechanics. It's fun to play, interesting to get into and really compete in. And now with the addition of these new models and the overhaul of the game to add better graphics, better performance, and as well as that, the new physics engine, it should really bring it back up to the kind of level you would expect. And certainly give War Thunder a run for their money. The way I see it, Gaijin and Wargaming aren't competing quite as much as people think they are. The reason being that War Thunder is never going to do what World of Tanks does very well, and World of Tanks is never going to do what War Thunder does very well. They're two different games. World of Tanks is a competitive, team-based game with no respawns, one life per match. It's definitely competitive. The whole game is rigged towards being competitive. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word rigged, or the conspiracy theorists will start off, but the whole game is engineered to be competitive. So you have your player stats, and the matches are deliberately designed to be short format, one life per match. Whoever plays the best or gets the luckiest wins. Whereas War Thunder is, and World of Tanks is a more sort of mathematical, traditional gaming take on things, where you have hit points and you have DPM and you have all this math to do in your head. It's more suited towards players who might not have the lightning fast reflexes that they did in their youth, or who enjoy that kind of slow, methodical gameplay in that sense. Whereas War Thunder, you can one-shot kill other tanks. It's supposed to be a more realistic model. I don't know if I call it realistic, but it's a more sort of realism themed model. And yes, it will foster slow, methodical gameplay because people aren't going to want to move out of their bush unless they get one shot. But it's a totally different game. You don't have that element of probability and the need to be able to do arithmetic on the fly. You don't have the one life per match issue. So if you die, you just spawn back in a different tank and continue playing. So there's no responsibility really in War Thunder for one player. In World of Tanks, you really do carry a lot of responsibility. As any member of a team, any team, it doesn't matter. You might be the bottom tier scout tank, you could still make a significant impact. In War Thunder, there's no onus on players to actually carry. There's no sort of expectation for them to do good or to play competitively. They just sort of drive around and shoot things, which is fine, because some days I get fucking sick of losing games in World of Tanks, and I decide I want to just drive around and shoot things. And at the moment, because I'm not in the War Thunder Ground Forces beta, there's not a lot where I can do that. And so I think the two games will, rather than competing with each other and trying to one-up each other in the scheme of things, I think they will actually end up complementing each other, and you will find a lot of World of Tanks players and a lot of War Thunder Ground Forces players will dabble in the other game, if not just play both regularly, which is what I'm planning on doing. But it definitely does sort of catch World of Tanks up now that they're finally implementing all these things that they've been sort of hinting at for a long time and fans have been clamoring for. So it should certainly improve the experience.